Hello and welcome to today's live session. Today I'm going to be talking about risk assessment. I'm Dr. Asha Patel, clinical psychologist and founder at Innovating Minds. And we support by training frontline practitioners to become trauma-informed sensitive practitioners. And we do this by offering a variety of training, but also providing the ongoing support and resources. So today I'm going to be looking at risk assessments and sharing with you how you can support your team to feel more confident with understanding and assessing risk. And I'm just going to go through an assessment template that we have at Innovating Minds for our EduPod users. So those are senior mental health leads in schools. But the template can also be used within organisations. So whether that's residential services for children in care, whether that's community-based settings and educational settings. So it's really important to think about risk assessment and how you communicate risk with the wider team and have conversations with risk. It makes us feel quite anxious and nervous when we're thinking about risk, and that's generally because the risk that comes with it. So in terms of the behavioural difficulties that you might see, but also then the long-term impact of kind of getting it wrong as well. So whether that's the impact on the young person that you're working with and the team and yourself as well. So if you're a part of managing risk, maybe risk minimisation doesn't go to plan, then actually the outcomes can be quite difficult, really. Now, just thinking about the language first, so we talk about it as risk minimisation, and the reason for that is there's no way that we can totally eradicate risk, particularly when we're looking at different categories of harm. Now, just to be mindful for your own mental health and well-being, we will be talking about some sensitive topic areas, not going into detail, but touching upon things around risk around self-harm and suicide. If at any point this live is making you feel a little bit uncomfortable, either feel free to leave or come back a later date to watch other parts of the recording. So when we're thinking about risk, having these open conversations is really important because it actually can alleviate people's worries and concerns, and it also helps people to feel more confident and comfortable with coping with the risk and managing that risk as well. So it's ideal if you have some type of formula process in place, and this formal process can help you with documentation, but also your risk, creating this risk minimisation plan. And typically you see it as a risk assessment template. So it might be in a risk assessment that brings together all the assessment work that you've completed, all the information that you've got, bringing all the agencies together that are involved to have a risk assessment in place. Now, it's important to think about who's involved in your risk assessment. So this isn't just something that you should be doing in isolation. You should be doing it in collaboration with the individual that you're conducting the risk assessment on. So whether it's the young person or an adult, but also other agencies that might be involved. So whether it's community mental health services, whether it's residential support, whether it's social workers, for example, that's involved, and also wider members of your team, including your support staff as well. So whether that's administration support, maintenance support, might be that they're involved in being able to be a part of this risk minimisation plan. But also they might need to know information to be able to keep that individual safe. So thinking about the relevant people that's been involved, have they been made aware? So sharing information is really critical. A lot of the reviews that we see where risk management hasn't really taken place, it's generally because of lack of communication or not sharing information between people and organisations. Now, when you come to do a risk assessment, in terms of the review date, it would be dependent on the level of risk. And also, if the more information is coming or risk is starting to change, then you would continuously update the risk assessment. So it might be that originally you anticipate that you're going to review it on a monthly basis or a weekly basis, but within that time frame, you can update it in between that as well as you've got more information. Now, typically what happens is when we're thinking about young people experiencing suicidal ideation, or might be actively engaging in trying to complete suicide, or they're engaging in self-harming behaviours. These are things that causes us adults to be quite scared of, or it makes us feel quite anxious. It makes us quite nervous because we're not sure in terms of, are they going to act upon what they're saying? So there's lots of myths around that as well. So it's really important that you take everything seriously and put it in your risk assessment. And you're putting things in historically and current as well. So for young people, it might be anything of over a year. So that might class as historical risk. So historical risk, it might be that it's previously been there, but it's currently low. It might be that they've not engaged in that risk behaviour within the past 12 months. But nevertheless, it's important that people are still aware of it, because just because it's previously happened doesn't mean that it might not be something fact for the future. So when you're thinking about how to put together a risk assessment, you want to really define the risk. So what is a risk category, and then describe that risk. So who might be harmed? How might they either be harming themselves or other people? So really finding description so people can understand the nature of the risk, and also to see if they understand where somebody's presenting with that as well. Now, your risk minimisation plan is a standardised plan that you have developed within your team to really to minimise risk. And for example, for self-harm, it's not something, for example, that staff are not to intervene if it's not safe to do so. So if you're on your own and actually they might have got an instrument on them and it's not safe to remove them, so because of cross-contamination and your own policies, then it's making sure that medical attention is there on hand for support if somebody is actively engaged in self-harming behaviours. So the risk minimisation plan needs to be very detailed. It needs to identify what plans you're putting in place and who's going to be actioning them. And then you're also rating the likelihood, the severity, in order to identify the risk level. And we have a bit of a matrix here that helps you with this scoring. And again, the likelihood and severity is based on the information that you have. So part of this risk assessment might be you've identified actually don't have much information, and therefore we could quite confidently assume that that then increases risk. If you don't have much information, and therefore your risk minimisation plan is quite ill-informed and maybe based on standardised procedures until you get to know this young person more, then actually that might be an escalation that could increase risk of likelihood, for example. Now, you can also get input from young people and adults if you feel like it's safe to do so, and you have that relationship, that therapeutic relationship with them, for them to be able to discuss in terms of what can we put in place to keep you safe. And again, you probably use a different template. You wouldn't share this one necessarily with them. Might be that you create a more child-friendly version and a more readable friendly version for them. It's important that you do try and capture their voice in this risk minimisation plans, and also for them to know what would happen should risk start to escalate. So your own policies and procedures, your actual planning that'll take place, and who you'd have to contact, what support would they be given. It might be that the plan states that actually if we don't feel that we can keep them safe, maybe in the community, it might be, for example, trips or something like that would have to be assessed. And that's not as a punitive approach to say, well, you've engaged in maybe self-harm and therefore you can't go on this trip. This is very much about keeping that young person safe. And that's really important that you communicate that with your team as well, so people are aware that these are not punitive approaches. This is all about keeping this individual safe. Now, a part of your risk assessment as well, I think it's also important that you include things around early warning signs. So what changes in behaviours might you notice? What is it that the young person might be saying? Is there any changes in their physical appearance, or the pacing, or the swearing? Is it that there's maybe something that happens, so trigger, then we move on to triggers. So is it arguments that take place, is specific anniversaries that we know of? And also, is there anything else in terms of, is it a certain type of person or something that's taken place, or quite stressful events that can be quite triggering? Is it a return of a relationship? So is it that they've had contact with a particular family member? That can be quite difficult for them. So really identifying what are their early warning signs and what can trigger the risk of this risk category from occurring. And then also coping strategies. So what is it that helps this young person? And it might be initially, it might be distraction techniques. We know they're short term. Nevertheless, it can help to reduce the risk, the acute present risk that's currently present. So therefore, identifying what their coping strategies are, or what they need the adults to support them with. So is it that they want the adults to initiate the conversation? Is it that they need an adult to kind of say, suggest particular activities for them to engage in? So your risk assessment is quite then robust. On an ongoing basis, you're reviewing it and having a look at who's to action it and the date to be completed. Then you would have risk review meetings to have a look in terms of how is the risk, in terms of is it still as severe as it previously was? Is the risk reducing in terms of the likelihood of it presenting? Are you seeing a decrease in the frequency of risk behaviours presenting? So that gives you an idea in terms of your risk minimisation plan and to see if it's working or not. It also helps within your particular setting, for example, in an educational setting that you've been supporting. It might be where you've put lots of plans in place, you've tried different options, but as you're coming back to your review meetings and maybe liaising with the external agencies, it's deemed that actually you're not in a position, the environment's not in a position to be able to keep this person safe. And that doesn't mean that we've failed. That means that actually we've identified and we've acknowledged that actually this young person needs a different type of support. Maybe they need some expertise in terms of professional input. Might be that the type of environment is not suitable for them, so therefore there's physical constraints that's having restrictions and we're able to keep them safe. And that's okay, and that gives you this journey, and that's why it's really important around documentation. If you haven't documented it, it's not really happened. So therefore, if you get everybody, particularly your team members, whoever it is, whether it's support staff, educational staff, pastoral staff, teachers, make sure that they're documenting conversations and review of risk assessment meetings. So you can show and you can track in terms of acknowledging the process that you've been through to minimise this risk from occurring. Now, in terms of different risk categories, there's some identified here. So suicide, neglect, abuse, unauthorised leave. So that's whether that's running away from school or from the home environment. So we know that can increase risk of things like CSE, so child exploitation and criminal exploitation. And there might be other types of risks as well. So this is an idea, just a template for you to have a look at and think about how are you recording risk, how are you managing risk within your setting, and don't be just think that about what if. So if you're working in a primary school setting, actually none of you, your team haven't come across a young person engaging in self-harming behaviours, that doesn't mean that it won't happen. Unfortunately, we are seeing more young people experiencing difficulties with self-harm and suicide. So it's better to be prepared, it's better to have the training, it's better to have these conversations so you can open this dialogue and support your team to effectively manage risk and alleviate some of those anxieties, concerns, those worries that you have about effectively managing risk. Now, if you do need any support or have any reflections, do feel free to message us at Innovating Minds, and please let me know if you found this live helpful. See you again next week.